Thank you. Hi, I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. This is David Schiff of Reed College, among other things. That is Carlos Kalmar, music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Good evening.
And David is here because Carlos will be conducting one of his pieces, and it's a really fun piece of music. I listened to it again today. I hadn't heard it in a while, but I put on the Seattle Symphony CD of Infernal, and it is so swanky. It is so cool. And some of it reminded me of the really cool theme songs that were written in the 50s for some things. And that got me to YouTube, listening to the Peter Gunn theme.
Right.
It set me off on an afternoon of great music. So you like that idea?
The whole idea was Stravinsky meets Mancini.
Exactly.
So,
Genius meets genius, but just different flavors.
Right.
So tell us more.
Well, the origin of this piece, Infernal, has a lot to do with one of our favorite subjects in Portland, which is caffeine. About 10 years ago, and this also shows how fast technology evolves, Starbucks, you might remember, was selling CDs. This is when people sold CDs instead of just streaming everything. And so, because Starbucks is headquartered in Seattle, they had the idea that the Seattle Symphony would make a CD just for sale at Starbucks. And then the conductor of the Seattle Symphony, Jerry Schwartz, had the idea that he would commission, I think, 8 composers to write pieces for this Starbucks CD. The condition was that we would write pieces based on other pieces, other previously existing pieces. So the first thing I did, I took the Minuet on the Name of Haydn by Ravel, one of my favorite pieces, and I orchestrated it. I sent it to Maestro Schwartz. He said, "It's very nice, but it's been done." So he said, "David Diamond has done it already." I said, "Okay, plan B." And I said, "Okay, I'll do the Infernal dance from Firebird." And so I had to transform Stravinsky's Firebird. And I have very vivid memories the first time I heard Firebird, because it was in Rome in 1960, in the baths of Caracalla, outdoors in Rome. And I'll never forget the sound of the harmonics in the prelude. I remember jumping out of my seat when I heard that, and I said, "Oh my God, that's the most amazing sound." So I decided I would, and there was a kind of poetic justice in this, and Stravinsky wrote a lot of music based on other people's music. I think, okay, this is time I will write music based on Stravinsky. And as a kind of angle on Stravinsky, I said, well, I'll write it in the style of Henry Mancini. Okay. And you'll hear what happened.
It's really fun, and I think Stravinsky would love it because he wrote music inspired by jazz. He kind of tried to get a little jazzy in some of his music, so I think he would think it's really cool. How long since you heard anybody play it?
It's been a long, actually, I've never heard it played in a concert before. I think it has been played, but I haven't heard it because it was written for a CD. So I was at the recording session, and it was one of those real economical recording sessions. Okay, we got that phrase, we got that one. And they kind of pasted it together and said, okay, we got the whole thing. And I don't think they ever played it from beginning to the end.
So you heard it now from the beginning, and
this
you
is
thought
the first
it's
time.
actually a good piece.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I think it's a terrific piece.
Actually, I think that's a shame because you always look out for pieces that can introduce, let's say, a concert really well. Whatever comes, well, it has to fit kind of, and tonight I think it fits especially the second piece quite well. And you're looking sometimes for pieces that are, let's say, 5, 6, 7 minutes. And if you are, I didn't know that this was actually not being, that it's kind of, Starbucks did it and that's it. Because as far as I'm concerned, I can say this piece has a lot of advantages. It's a piece of American music. I like American music, especially here in the United States. Second, for us here in Portland, well, David is from Portland. I know you are not from Portland, but essentially, you are from Portland. You can say that, right?
I've been here 35 years. You'd think it would count. Okay,
yeah.
so.
Third, as far as instrumentation goes, you always look, because when you're a music director, you think economically, you think for 6 minutes of music, as fun as it may be, let's not blow up the orchestra. So let me not hire 700 extras that cost so much money and then play 6 minutes. It's not economically done. This piece, perfect. It's a good, big orchestra. And lastly, which I think is the most important, it has not only to be a good piece of music, which it is, it has to be, in this case, entertaining. You will sit there and smile. I promise you, because on one side you can smile if you are more in the corner of Henry Mancini, because you will think like, that's Henry Mancini with a twist, or it's very witty jazz. And on the other side, everybody who actually knows the Firebird, the Infernal dance really well, will think, oh my God, this is so smartly done, what he does to it, because it's, yeah, sometimes you hear phrases from the Firebird as you know them, but it's really jazzy. I mean, it's twisted, and sometimes David takes off and he's in his own corner, and then he comes back, and yeah, delightful.
And that recording was called Echoes, all those pieces played by the Seattle Symphony, was reissued on the Naxos label. Might be on the table in the lobby for sale tonight, I don't know.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Good.
It's really fun.
It is. Okay.
It is. Thank you, Judy. But David's piece is by far the best on there and the most fun. It's true. I speak the truth. And if you believe that, okay. Since you're here, I'm curious to get some of your thoughts on Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky, the other guys on this program. Either these specific pieces or not.
Well, my reaction to these specific pieces is different. The Rhapsody of Rachmaninoff is one of the pieces we all grow up with, and I find the more I hear it, the more I like it. It just never gets old. It's just a wonderful, it's kind of indestructible piece. So I'm thrilled to be on a program with it. It's one of the really the great pieces of the 20th century. And the Tchaikovsky is wonderful because I've never heard it before.
Yeah, me too.
So
I think everybody's here in for a treat. I mean, the Rachmaninoff, I can only second what David is saying. This is one of the pieces that actually is indestructible. And the Tchaikovsky is in itself a very interesting piece of music, because it is, you know, composers go through phases, and most of them, and they have their highs and then they have the lows. And Rachmaninoff, his own story, because first he writes all this music, apart from his big depression, when he got when he got destroyed by the critics. Okay, that happened, and then he writes all this music, and then 1917 appears, and he has to leave his country, and he turns his career over into something very different, which was not writing music. It was mainly being a pianist, and occasionally he writes music. And so in Rachmaninoff's life, it's like 3 years of nothing, and then one piece, 5 years of nada, a prelude, and stuff like that. And the Rhapsody is actually late Rachmaninoff. and he wrote it for himself. So he did well for himself. Now, in terms of Tchaikovsky, the story is interesting because on one side, probably the best time, as far as we all enjoy it in our programs in our day and age, for Tchaikovsky are symphonies 4, 5, 6, and that time around, and the Manfred that you're going to hear tonight is between 4 and 5. So it's really like, come on, Tchaikovsky's blossoming, but you never hear this piece. It's getting a little more popular, and I think I know why. I think it's mainly because we live in times where to be extremely subtle gets increasingly difficult. What you need is the beefy elephant that really comes. And just, I told the orchestra, because the orchestra actually did not really know Manfred. Maybe some players had played it, but the others, nobody had played it. And since I was here in this wonderful hall 10 days ago, when Jan Pascal conducted Tchaikovsky 5, that was a magnificent reading of that symphony. I said, if you think Tchaikovsky 5 is a big symphony, just wait what is coming at you. Because Manfred is considerably bigger, larger, longer, more mass, and in a certain way you could even say more emotions. So there is, I think, a lot to discover here.
David, you are a very literary man with multiple degrees in literature, in addition to your multiple degrees in music. He's a talented, intelligent guy.
I'm worried about where this is going because I don't.
It's going. Fear not. It's going to Lord Byron
Yes.
and romantic writers of that time, early 19th century. Have you read any of that stuff? I haven't.
In a previous life, I did, but it's been a long time. But one of the interesting things with Byron is that within kind of the opinion of English literature, he was kind of marginalized. He's not thought of as in the same category with Keats or with Tennyson. But on the continent, he was greatly admired. And that's why it's not surprising that Tchaikovsky would write. I mean, Schumann also did this. So his reputation outside of England, and I don't know, sometimes poetry, it's rare, but sometimes it's improved in the translation. So this may be a case of that. But there's a strange discrepancy because the Byron that tends to be read in English literature, at least when I was in school, again, this is totally out of date, was the satiric Byron, Don Juan, which is very funny and very topical, but less so the romantic Byron. But on the continent, the romantic Byron had tremendous impact, and that's why we have this.
Carlos, have you read any of that kind of literature?
I have not read, actually, in preparing for Manfred, it's not the first time I'm conducting this piece. I, of course, read a lot of, what is this about? And every time I read it, I'm thinking, I have no idea what this is about. It's really obscure, romantic, and the hero and the goddess. I mean, to put it actually in modern words, this is an interesting symphony. It's a symphony, but it's actually not a symphony. It's a symphonic poem in 4 acts, 4 poems, or whatever you want. And the main topic, which is Manfred's life, is actually about a man who has pretty much, he's an ancient hero and he has lost it all and he's completely out of his mind, desperate at the beginning, and turns to spirits, fairies, whatever he can find, in order to find answers for probably what are the questions of life. Why are we here? What are we doing? Etc., etc., etc. And all of that, which is also interesting thinking about Lord Byron and a Russian composer, everything takes place in the Alps. which is like, why? But never mind. And the interesting thing is that somewhat Tchaikovsky manages to tie the 4 poems together with the Manfred theme that appears pretty much in it. It's, if you remember, if you were here for Tchaikovsky 5, in Tchaikovsky 5, it's da-da-dee, da-da-dee, da. In every movement it's there somewhere. I mean, it's this, and in this, it's exactly the same techniques. There is a theme which represents Manfred, and it comes everywhere, which is kind of strange because after all this desperation in the first movement, the second movement is the kind of the figure of a fairy seen through a waterfall in the Alps. End of story. And the third movement has not really something to do with Manfred, it's just the life of the people who live in the Alps. And that last moment is really Manfred getting into... I learned something again, as every time I learn something about English language. Yesterday in the pre-concert talk in Salem, I said the word, because I've read it, I said, the last movement starts with an orgy. And chuckle. And I learned that actually you don't say orgy, because what is meant in this case is not sexual at all. It's just...
Darn it.
Tchaikovsky writing, oh yeah. It's actually real mayhem, everything together, and the fairies, and the bad guys, and in the middle Manfred. And then there is this, after all this, not orgy, is over, appears Astarte, the goddess, whom Manfred was in love with, and he lost her, and then we go back to the orgy, and at the end, Manfred dies. So expect something highly, highly dramatic and quite dark. I mean, Tchaikovsky is always dark.
Although I must say, I've never heard this piece except at the rehearsal, and the scherzo is amazing. It's like Mendelssohn revved up beyond Mendelssohn. It's extraordinary and quite virtuosic for the orchestra. So that's an amazing, and the sounds he gets are really incredible.
It's actually a great thing, and just to give you a little perspective on historically what happened is the idea of writing something large on Manfred with a sort of constructed plot is considerably older than this piece. Matter of fact, the Russian composer Mili Balakirev wanted Berlioz to write this piece because he thought, well, you, Hector, you are such a great composer, and you wrote Symphonie Fantastique, which kind of deals with all this spirits and craziness and so on. But Berlioz said, look, I am old, I'm sick, I will not do it, not interested. And the plot disappeared for 14 years. And then Balakirev thought, well, Tchaikovsky wrote pieces like The Tempest and other symphonic poems, so he's a master of that form. Here it is. And then Tchaikovsky studies it and says no, and then he says yes. And then he writes it and says two things about what he writes. First he said, I've never in my entire life have struggled so much to write a piece of music like in this one. And then he said, and I think it's my best piece of symphonic music. Interesting. Nonetheless, he refused to receive any payment for it because he said this will be never a success. And half a year later, this is kind of typical Tchaikovsky, he said, this piece is really not good at all. So, essentially, I think what David already said, and he heard the scherzo, is actually the valid point. It's absolutely great music. It's fantastic. It's the piece by Tchaikovsky that is underrated all the way along. And I can tell you why. It's darker than the usual. it's long. So if we are all accustomed to symphonies by Tchaikovsky that last 41 minutes, 42, this is 55. So it gets a little in the corner of Mr. Bruckner and Mr. Mahler. And as I always like to tell everybody, it's not appealing for conductors. Because, you know, at the end, and Tchaikovsky did such a great job with that, Symphony number 5, number 4, number 2, all of them, at the end, and we stand there in our glory, we conductors. And in this case, well, Manfred dies, it's very quiet. It's over, sorry.
So give Carlos a break and give him big ovations after David Schiff and Sergei Rachmaninoff, okay? Okay. So you probably know Romeo and Juliet Fantasy Overture by Tchaikovsky. To me, this piece kind of sounds like a cross between that and the Sixth Symphony. It's on the big 4-movement scale, but it's got some of the soaring melodic character of Romeo and Juliet some of the time, and sort of similar harmonic stuff going on. And thank you yet again for bringing us something that we wouldn't otherwise get to hear. Now, do you want to say a word or two about your wonderful pianist, who is quite the incredible human?
Oh, Kirill. Well, you know Kirill. Kirill Gerstein, Russian, American passport, because we joke about that. Russian pianist.
Also a jazz pianist, which ties in nicely with David.
Actually, I always said this. This is an interesting. He's not only one of the best pianists around in our day and age. No question. Is the first time I think it was the first time I worked with Kirill. I asked him to play Rhapsody in Blue, which you think like, why did you ask a Russian pianist to play Rhapsody in Blue? And well, the thing is, Kirill has a degree in jazz. So he knows a little bit, and he played the heck out of Rhapsody in Blue. But ever since we have played a couple of other pieces, and he has been here in Portland, I think this must be the 4th time during the last 12 years, and very deservedly so. And we are already, today we were at lunch together and we were joking about what we are going to cook up for you the next time, because he mentioned, I wonder whether anybody here in the room knows the piece that he said, why don't we do the piano concerto by Busoni? Anybody knows the piece?
That would sort of fit in with Manfred in a way.
It's insane, right? It's
Has a men's chorus.
As a men's chorus, it's huge.
5 movements, 65 minutes, men's chorus at the end. Just brace yourself.
Or
we'll see.
If you don't like that idea, David Schiff could write something for Kirill Gerstein. I like that idea a lot, but it's not my place to suggest such things.
We like the way you think.
Yeah, I'm amazed at Kirill Gerstein and his versatility, his intelligence, his incredible playing. To sit down at the piano and improvise an accompaniment to Storm Large singing Summertime, which happened a few years ago here. What a talent. What a talent.
Well, and he's playing this piece by Rachmaninoff. You know, Rachmaninoff actually, talking about stories of composers, composers are, to me, so interesting human beings. And well, in the case of Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky, they are unfortunately not anymore with us, but you study actually a little bit of the historic content in which they lived, and you realize that Rachmaninoff actually, who is now very well known for one specific thing, which is one of the greatest pianists in the 20th century, didn't start out as such. Actually, the word was that Rachmaninoff, who comes from an aristocratic family that ran out of money, studied music in Russia, made his name as a composer and as a conductor. And as people said back in the old days, you can read that in historic books, yeah, and he played piano on the side fairly well. And then the October Revolution happened, and his family had to leave Russia pretty much to never come back, and he had to make a living. And he kind of, aside from a little here and there, he lived the remainder of his life in the United States. However, he had written already so much music, but the royalties were not coming to him because there was no agreement between the United States and old Russia. So
Stravinsky had the same problem.
yeah, so Rachmaninoff poverty was kind of looming around, so he decided, I have to take up the piano, which he played fairly well, and he made a career as a pianist, which is, from my perspective, funny, because when he came to this country and conducted, he was offered 2 positions here. One was Cincinnati Symphony music director, the other was the Boston Symphony music director. And you think, of course, like, maybe that. And he refused. He said, no, I need to feed my family, let me play the piano. Made a huge career, wrote in 1934 it was, 1934, the piece you're going to hear tonight. And now he's revered as the piano composer pretty much of that era, rightly so.
This is going to be a very interesting concert. Really glad you're here for the concert. Glad you came to our conversation tonight. Thanks for being here. Joe Cantrell has been videotaping this, and you'll be able to find that on YouTube and at allclassical.org. David Schiff, Carlos Kalmar,
Robert McBride.
and thou.
I'll have to do.